Thanks for tuning in to Written on the Edge, Season 7, Episode 35. I'm Vance Bastion, here with my co-host, S.A. Baz Collins.
Howdy, howdy.
And we're really glad you're here with us. On today's show, Dr. Redfern Jon Barrett joins us to discuss their latest novel, followed by our review of My Fake Boyfriend. Then Baz and I will share what's held our attention this week. So if you like hearing updates about queer content creators, support us on Patreon, hit our merch store. But now, on to our guest. Born in Sheffield in 1984, Redfern grew up in market towns, seaside resorts, and the post-industrial cities before moving to Wales and gaining a PhD in literature from Swansea University in 2010. Redfern is non-binary queer and has campaigned for LGBTQ+ and polyamory rights since they were a teenager, and they currently live in Berlin. Redfern, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
A returning champion.
Yeah, right?
I won the podcast.
There you go. So for folks who did not hear your first interview, let's give a quick how you became an author and share where that fire started.
So I actually never really, I wrote some stories when I was a kid, as a lot of writers do, but I never really thought of that as a possible career choice at all. And then when I was doing my PhD, a time when you traditionally have a lot of time on your hands, right?
Right.
I was working 3 jobs, and I actually, though I enjoyed writing the PhD, I really, really wanted something that felt like it was mine, because academic writing is of a particular type, like a very particular type. And so the creative side of me just really, really wanted to take the free hour I had every day and create something. So, yeah, I started writing in the middle of my PhD and just never stopped.
Perfect. Well, we are here today to discuss your most recent novel, Proud Pink Sky, and the artwork is there for folks on the YouTube. If I were to pick it up and read the jacket, what would it say?
So Proud Pink Sky is essentially about the world's first gay city-state. It's set in this alternate Berlin, which after World War II is established as a gay and lesbian federal state. And it follows 2 characters, William and Sissy. William is a queer teenager, and Sissy is a heterosexual housewife who already lives in Berlin. And it follows them as they live their lives, as William arrives in the city and Sissy lives her life there. And they both, in their own ways, become embroiled in the different subcultures and politics that are happening in the city. So what Proud Pink Sky is really about is an exploration of the relationships between lesbian, gay, bi, trans, non-binary, queer people, and how those interactions really come about and the ways in which those power dynamics play out. It's something that I saw and have thought about a lot. It's been almost 20 years that I've been involved in queer activism, community organisation, and in that time, you see, I'm sure both of you too, you see an awful lot, and a lot of those dynamics I really, really wanted to get down in novel form, but in a way that straight audiences can also connect with and also find something in a novel that they can understand, because fundamentally, I think we all have this struggle between being who we are and finding a place within the community. That's something that I think pretty much everyone has experienced or relates to in some way. So yeah, Proud Pink Sky is really, really exploring that idea through LGBTQ politics.
So before we dive into the internal relations, can I ask how you kept the rest of the world from not bombing your new Berlin?
So Berlin actually starts off very, very bombed. In this, I created this alternate timeline for the novel because, I studied history for a long time, and like Baz, both of us have written alternate history. I created this timeline going back to the 1600s. And it really relates, the divergence point for this history is polyamory, the gay slang that originated in the 1600s, obviously starting out among carnival performers and then spreading to the theatre and various subcultures. Right. Polyamory winds up much more dominant. And so there becomes a much firmer gay identity earlier on in this timeline. And in the 1800s, you start getting all of these groups and societies set up, and there are calls for a gay homeland. in answer to the question, Berlin does get very badly bombed because in Berlin's gay and lesbian population at the outbreak of, when Hitler rises to power, is about 1 million people. So they wind up being these riots and revolts among the queer population in the city, and as a response, the city gets completely shelled. So Berlin basically isn't a factor in the Second World War. And then after the war, the United Nations declares that Berlin is its own city-state, and then the rebuilding happens. And it starts off with this gay and lesbian government, but then, of course, there are conflicts with bi, trans, and queer subcultures within that city.
Mm-hmm. So how did you handle the delicate interrelations then between what I call the silos of the rainbow flag?
Oh, I like that term, the silos of the rainbow flag. What I didn't want this novel to be was something that is very dogmatic, prescriptive, or one-sided. I'm non-binary myself. I have my own views and experiences within queer communities, but I really, really didn't want to tell this story from one single place. And I also didn't want it to have one single message. So the story is sympathetic towards pretty much everyone. It explores different angles and perspectives from the novel's multiple characters. And I really, really didn't want this to be a novel about, I don't know, gay people versus queer people, or radical feminists versus trans people, or anything like that. I really, really wanted to demonstrate. I mean, of course, the novel is very, very sympathetic towards marginalized people, but I didn't want this to just be a very plain one-sided book. I wanted this to be something that people really think about. So, yeah, this kind of variety of perspectives from all the different colors of the rainbow flag was something that I think was really, really core to what Proud Pink Sky is.
And I like your inclusion of Sissy. Was she your way that straight audiences could relate to the story, or did she have a deeper part to play?
So, yeah, I mean, I think it is, I wanted to have, characters that straight audiences could relate to within the novel. She has her own journey of discovery through the novel. The novel focuses a lot on gender and gender identity and how those might vary or be fluid within each of us. And I also just wanted some, I think that when we're talking about, gender identity, sexuality, things like that, I really wanted a character who was a young mother. Because I think that particularly women with children often get sidelined in these discussions. So I kind of wanted that front and center within this novel.
Okay. Baz, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I talk a little bit about, I don't want to get spoilery because I'm almost done with the book, and I'm going to do a book club review of it. So I'm planning on that. So keep an eye out for that, people. It's coming. But I want you to hit a little deeper on, without being spoilery too much, about how you're talking about the interpolitics between the community, because it's a real thing. I mean, even in our lives right now, it's a real thing. You constantly hear, even celebrities who are non-binary, you hear the disparaging comments that come, and now people are, really abusing it by saying, oh, my pronouns are, I'm a Christian and I'm a, which has nothing to do with the conversation, but they're just being ridiculous and taking it to a ridiculous level. So given the alternate history you have, how do you deal with the politics? Is it something where we've kind of, as a community, we've moved beyond those segments and the disparaging kind of bickering between? So are you writing towards something you want us to see, or is it something that is more representative of what we have now? It's just in a different context.
Well, it's kind of both in a way. In the one hand, I did want to portray the dynamics and divisions that happen now, and I think that there is, particularly as there has been more acceptance of gay people, I think that there has been an element in which certain parts of the gay community really, really want to be seen as normal and the same as straight people, as a way of finding acceptance. I don't think it's a true way of finding acceptance. At the same time, gay people, gay men and women in particular are still marginalized and do still experience, violence and all sorts of forms of discrimination. So it's an understandable impulse, even if it isn't the right one. Sidebar.
No worries.
I lost track of the question. Just got on my thoughts for a second.
Interpolitics between the
yes.
parts.
Okay. On sidebar. And yeah, so that was really fundamentally at the core of it. What I want is a call for solidarity at the same time, to express this is how things actually are. And at the same time, remind us that this infighting, the focus among, say, some gay and lesbian people in targeting trans people or, excluding trans people, for example, it doesn't make us any safer. In fact, like quite the opposite. And
right.
Absolutely. And one thing we're seeing with anti-trans discourse is that it is now also leading, of course, predictably to homophobic discourse. So if you see in the United Kingdom right now, there's a group called the LGBT Alliance, and they get a lot of attention from transphobic press. And the LGBT Alliance are often, of course, you can tell from the name that they're excluding trans people, but they don't just exclude trans people. And there have been comments made by senior members of the LGBT Alliance that say gay men shouldn't be teachers, things like that. Fundamentally through the book, I think it's really, really important to have a reminder that if we don't stand together, we lose.
It goes back to that old idiom, stronger together and apart, we're easy to pick off one by one. The thing that I kind of wanted to touch on it is that those political divisions within the sub-elements within the larger community, it's kind of like, it's almost like even if you write an alt history and even if you're trying to write a utopian kind of vision of what we want to see, because of human flaws and frailties, we kind of never really learn entirely. Do you know what I mean? As a society. I mean, now we're getting, as you've pointed out, the whole conversation of playbook stuff from like the 60s when they were first pushing back on the community in mass media. We're getting, right-wing people using those old phrases of grooming and, stuff that we long settled. And yet, again, we never learn, and it's come right back full circle again. In what I kind of wanted to drill down in, and when I was trying to get to was another bullet point in our show notes here, is non-binary identity. And I think that the thing that for me that I want to kind of get before the people to get them to kind of understand your position as a non-binary person is to kind of take away some of the misconceptions of what it is. I think a lot of people, when they see non-binary and they see it seems to come from someone who may have been assigned female at birth, it's like, oh, they're rejecting the patriarchy. I think some people put that in their head, and it's like a cosplay almost, oh, they're rejecting it, so now they want to dress up and and I think that is part of the problem in the conversation, is that they're not giving the seriousness of that identity its due. They try to marginalize it, by writing it off as something. And I think when people who were assigned male at birth become non-binary, they just see it as a larger expression of gayness that this assigned male birth person is trying to project. So can you give us a little bit more context for our listeners and our viewers of what it means to be a non-binary person within the queer community and also just in your everyday life? And I know that was a roundabout way to get to the question, but
I mean, it's really interesting, and especially with you mentioning, the sort of differences between people who are assigned male at birth and assigned female at birth within the non-binary community, because I think that it's only really relatively recently that assigned male at birth non-binary people are really coming into their own, becoming much more visible. And I mean, I think it's a really beautiful thing to see, but it took me a very long time to come to terms. there's no one thing that makes you non-binary. There's nothing you can really point to and be like, that's it. But there are things that I look back at in my past which make a lot more sense. You know, like as a child, you know, throughout my whole childhood, I played with traditionally masculine and feminine toys. You know, like I was drawn to dolls and to toy cars, things like that. I had equal numbers of friends who were boys and friends who were girls, and at the same time never really fit in with either. And there's a lot of ways in my life in which I've always felt as though my gender identity wasn't really very easy to summarize. You know, didn't really fit into the category of man, but at the same time I wasn't trans, and you know, I wasn't a woman inside either. And it was very hard because there weren't a lot of examples. When you talked about non-binary people, usually it was much more, I mean, it was often people who are AFAB. And, you know, I had, there were a few things that made me really think about my own identity in that way. And one was I had a roommate who was non-binary. And they were very, you know, they did drag, and they had a lot of ways, or they do drag, and they had a lot of ways in which they, you know, were sort of more visibly non-binary. And so I didn't really feel that what I felt inside was something that I could really declare. It was, you know, another way of coming out that took a really long time. And since coming out, I found more ways, you know, of exploring my gender identity. It's very, very difficult, of course, if you're assigned male at birth to do that, because, you know, I wear makeup daily, and you know, sometimes it's just a small amount, like right now wearing lipstick, and you know, it's not as visible, but if sometimes it's brighter, or you know, I love experimenting with eyeshadow, but in public that's a very, very difficult and dangerous thing to do. You know, and that's something that, you know, every single time you go out, you know, I'm 2 meters tall as well, so that's I stand out. And it's something that in the very least you get stares, but also people shouting stuff, you know, or you might get violence, physical violence at you. It's really, really something that and that's really, really hard to deal with, actually, to be honest. It's because then you feel like, am I putting myself in danger by presenting who I am? You know, it's a similar dilemma if you hold hands with your partner, things like that.
Right.
So yeah, at the heart of the book was really exploring non-binary identity is a very, very important part of the book for both of the main characters in their own ways. And the ways in which non-binary identity isn't really and can't be reflected by traditional gay norms. You know, and that's something that I've come across again in my personal life quite a lot, you know, and I've had some cis gay men who've been wonderful, you know, like, of course, because there are wonderful people and then there are less wonderful people, you know, but at the same time, I've had a lot of, you know, cis gay men, like, who I haven't seen in years, who will come up to me and the first thing they say is some derogatory comment about my makeup, and not in a kind of like, you've done this wrong, but in the fact that you're wearing it. And it makes a lot of cis gay men very uncomfortable. It's kind of something that almost like I've kind of
almost like the proximity,
the side, you know.
right. The proximity makes it dangerous for them. You know what I think that's kind of where
I was on their team and now I'm something else, and that's very difficult to understand. But the thing is, at the heart of it, the important thing, and that's really, really what I want to get at in Proud Pink Sky, the important thing is that we are all marginalized. You know, we are all outside of the heteronormative idea of what we should be. And the hatred, whether it's transphobia or queerphobia, homophobia, biphobia, it all comes from a normative place. It all comes from the same place, you know, and that's really, really something that, you know, at 16, sorry, I came out as gay. It never really felt like it fit. I came out as queer later, and then non-binary still later after that. So it's something that I've seen from several different angles. And it's always, and also being polyamorous, you know, publicly being polyamorous also had a lot of negativity from that, some from, disappointingly, from the LGBTQ community. And it's always the same. It's always the same. You know, it's the homophobia, the bigotry towards polyamory, the queerphobia, the hostility towards being non-binary. All of it uses the same arguments. It comes from the same place, and it's all something that I really, really wanted to explore with this book.
Excellent. You know, it's funny when you were talking about that, something popped in my little pea brain up here, and I thought, you know, it's really kind of interesting. Everybody who like wants to be free to project their non-binary status, think about how much permission musicians in music are given. So, like, if all non-binary, I'm not saying this is the way to do it, but if all non-binary people walked around with a rock guitar behind their back, strapped to their back, people would probably go, "Oh, they're a musician."
That's what I'm missing.
But it's just kind of funny when you look at it from that perspective. You realize the ridiculousness of society trying to force the binary option, you know, and how ingrained it is that it would take something like, you know, every non-binary person walking around like a rock god for people to go, "Oh yeah, that's just, you know, that's the way they are," you know, and you know what I mean? And yet, if it's that simple, this is not a difficult concept to grasp, you know what I mean? I just find that really, really an interesting concept of how in society there are avenues where the permission is there. It's just like we need to bust the doors and say it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
I don't have to carry it.
I mean, I think there's always these like boxes which in which certain behavior is acceptable. You know, I mean, glam rock, of course, has been since 50 years ago. You know,
oh yeah.
People didn't have a problem with that. In Britain, you know, drag has been a part of, say, pantomimes and comedy going back decades and decades
and beyond.
I mean, yeah, of course. But at the same time, you know, you have someone in the street in the same who might look similar or be presented in a gender non-conforming way. That's bad. You know, that's a surprise.
Right.
That's and it's ridiculous because it's people will often tolerate in certain forms of entertainment what they won't tolerate in day-to-day life. Which makes very little sense.
But it is really, really funny when you think about it from that perspective. Oh, if you're in the arts, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and it's like, well, why would that make it different? You know, I mean, that's the part I struggle with when I look at non-binary people being crushed in that way. It's like, Jesus, people, just get up, grab a clue. You're already doing it. You know?
Yeah. Is
there anything else you want folks to know about the novel?
So it comes out in March next year, but it's already available for pre-order. It's on Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble and Target and a lot of independent bookstores. So if you just search for it online, or you can look on my website, which is redjon.com. It's redjon.com. And if you pre-order it now, then it'll arrive in March.
Perfect. All right.
And they can also pre-order it from the publisher, right?
Yes, of course. Sorry, yes, as well. It's being published by Amble, which is an imprint of Bywater Books. And yes, that's can also.
I always like to try to hype the publisher.
Yes, right. Of course. I should remember.
So, what have you got lined up? Are you going to set up a book tour and round of interviews for Proud Pink Sky?
Yeah, that's the plan. So I'm going to try, and I've got some places in Berlin marked out. In September, I've got a couple of events in Berlin. I'm on a panel discussion on September 23rd at the LCB in Berlin. And that starts in the afternoon. My panel's around 5 p.m. And then in October 14th, I have a reading from Proud Pink Sky, which will be half in English and half in German.
Cool.
I'm not reading the German part. My German got to just good enough to pass my citizenship, and it's going to stay there forever. Yes, I'll be reading from that on the 14th, and that is set to be a really great event. And yes, in a book tour in Britain, probably centered around Brighton and London, is in the works, and there will be venues in Berlin. It's possible that I will also try and do some events in the US. So just keep a look at the news part of my website, and everything goes up there. That's going to happen.
And just for folks, that URL again is redjon.com, redjon.com.
Redjon.com, yeah.
All right. Any final words of wisdom?
I don't have any wisdom at all.
Okay.
Just read my book.
I'm right there with you. I'm like, the bitch is tired. I can't do it.
All right. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to Dr. Redfern Jon Barrett for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely.
Yeah, don't make it so long in between visits.
Yeah.
You know.
Of course,
When
yeah,
that
it's
book
been far
actually-
too long.
When that book actually gets out there, come back and talk to us about it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely will do. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. If you enjoy learning about new artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for our episodes. If you'd like to hear the full interview and or a little more behind the scenes stuff, check out our Patreon. Now, on to our review.
Hey, gals, gays, and days, we're back with our review. And today we are reviewing a film that came out, about a month ago? A month and a half ago?
Yeah, it's not that old.
Yeah. It's Keenan Lonsdale and Dylan Sprouse. Kind of gay rom-com kind of thing, and it's called My Fake Boyfriend. So, you want to tell people what it's about and what you thought?
Let's see, the official write-up. No, that doesn't quite cover it. In the film, a young man in a tricky situation, played by Keenan Lonsdale, follows the advice of his unconventional best friend, Dylan Sprouse, and uses social media to create a fake boyfriend to keep his awful ex-lover out of his life. But everything backfires when he meets the real love of his life, and breaking up with his fake boyfriend proves hard to do. It's a little off because Keenan never actually, it wasn't his character's idea, it was Dylan's character's idea. And
Right.
Dylan was the one who had a hard time breaking up with the fake boyfriend, ironically enough, which we'll get into because that's important.
And Keenan plays Andrew and Dylan plays Jake, and then Jake is in a relationship with Kelly, played by Sarah Hyland, who is his girlfriend / significant other.
And then the awful ex-boyfriend that was mentioned, named Nico, is a soap opera star. Who uses his celebrity to keep Andrew under control. So already we have a gay relationship where there's a control element right off the bat.
Right.
And that's what Keenan's character Andrew's trying to get out of. So best friend Dylan, who is probably one of the best examples of the modern straight best friend as I have ever seen. He's just, it's a bromance, 100% all the way. And
Yeah,
it was very, very adorable. No, I was just saying the relationship was very adorable.
What I think is really interesting, I was just looking at the ratings. It's 4.9 out of 10, which isn't great on IMDb.
Wow.
Rotten Tomatoes has it at, if I could type,
It's okay.
sidebar.
Before I watched it, Rotten Tomatoes was at only 68%.
Well, now it's at 70.
Oh, all right.
But the critics have panned it at 56. So, here's the thing with this. I think this movie is deceptive in many respects. It deals with darker themes that that are underneath the surface. If you're really paying attention and not going in just for the rom-com element of it, there are themes that are presented here that are actually quite interesting. One, it deals with the naivete, and I thought this was the most ironic thing. In this world where we have so much information coming at us, and we have the whole concept of fake and flexing and all these social media norms that are out there, it's really fascinating that in an age of so much information that is rapidly available, we have so many vapid idiots who don't know when something's fake and can't, and they just latch on to the celebrity for the celebrity's sake. And this is what this story has a big element of, about how all the children, although there are a few from our generation that are represented here and there, who really believe that this fake boyfriend that Jake has deep faked for Andrew, his bestie's Andrew's benefit to get away from the toxic ex-boyfriend that who keeps going around and around as an ex-boyfriend. And they've gone around like 7 or 8 times by the time the movie starts.
And I mean, just to present it, Nico keeps cheating on Andrew is where the the biggest problem comes in.
And sees nothing wrong with it.
Right.
Because he knows Keenan loves him and he will always be on that string to yank back.
And there's the control element again.
Right, exactly. And it deals also with the control element between Kelly and Jake.
Oh, yeah.
Because Kelly's the voice of having a conscience and being a conscientious involvement in what they're doing for Andrew. She never loses sight of the goal. Whereas Jake, who doesn't believe in himself, creates this mastermind marketing campaign, which really shows off how good he really is. And he puts it all on Cristiano, the fake boyfriend, the deep fake boyfriend. He puts it all on his credit to this guy who's become real to him, because and as authors, we know what it's like to have our characters take over. But I don't think as authors we ever really let them cross that barrier in that, oh no, you can't touch them, kind of thing. I think it's kind of like,
Yep.
And it's interesting. I just looked to see who played Cristiano on IMDb, and the guy who's really good looking, very good looking, standard male model, supermodel, is played by Jaden Gates. And it's just one of those avatars. It's just a blank person.
Yeah, he doesn't have a picture.
I'm thinking, dude.
So, about halfway into this, when the whole Cristiano, the fake boyfriend, really started to take off, and people started like donating money to his cause and everything.
Right.
It suddenly reminded me of the movie Simone with Al Pacino, where he created a deep fake woman for a movie. Kind of sort of fell in love with her. But both of these movies have an element of catfishing the public, which is the other really deep, serious issue at play here.
It is. It's a major issue.
Because they have, in both movies, this entire fake human is created and people fall for it.
Yeah. In the grand information age, so there you go. Which is actually funny because people put a pin in this comment, because when we get to what are we on about and who won the week, I've got something to bring up that I'm on about that will help you out with this, what is fake and what is not. So anyways, I really liked it. I like the fact that Karen Robinson, who people will recognize from Schitt's Creek.
Yep.
She plays Keenan's mother, and I love her. I mean, she's one of those character actresses. She could just walk in and sit down in a chair, and I'd pay attention, She just commands that kind of presence.
She is also in PBS series Women Detective. I'm blinking on the name.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
She's also in Frankie Drake Mysteries, where she plays the mother of Frankie Drake's partner. And we started watching that specifically because we saw her name attached to it.
Yeah, she's fabulous. I love her. I do want to give a shout out to Samer Sullum, who plays Rafi, the new real boyfriend who comes up on the horizon that makes Andrew realize how far they've gone and how he was only tentatively in it to learn how to say no to Nico, the soap opera star that's his boyfriend, who's toxic. And when he finally achieves that moment of, yes, I finally told him, get out, you've lost me, it becomes really apparent to him in that whole epic turn that what real love really is, and that it was right there, and he noticed it early on in the picture, but it isn't until it starts to really progress and he begins seeing the real problem with this fake boyfriend that allowed him to stand up. And really, that's kind of the bottom line of this movie. It's learning to stand up for yourself, to love yourself enough to give yourself permission to be loved. It's really that kind of a scenario for both couples involved, really. So I think that people might write it off as a silly rom-com, but it really does have some significance as a commentary to our societal issues with social media.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I really liked about it. Some of the writing was kind of formulaic, as most rom-coms are in some way. What's coming in at some point in the film, and you're kind of just watching for the signpost. And there really is no major turn in this, although I will say the Absolute Vodka thing with Cristiano was absolutely hysterical.
That was fun.
And can I also say that I thought it was interesting that the film was produced by BuzzFeed, and they put themselves as an advertiser and a promoter in the movie.
Yep.
I thought, okay, well, there's your market placing.
Yeah, no, there's some product placement going on.
Yeah. Anyways, why don't we get to our scores? You go.
Mine's are easy. 4 across the board. It was all very enjoyable, but like Baz said, nothing jumped out at you until you thought about it a bit.
I'm mine vary between 3.5 and 4s. The one place where I will say that I gave it a 3.5 are the script writing, because there were, I think they could have done something. They had an opportunity to do something slightly different, because gay romance comedies are kind of a new thing. We've only recently got Hallmark Christmas comedies that put that together. So I think that the opportunity to break the formula a little bit, or rearrange or zhuzh it up or move it around a little bit, I think the opportunity was missed. So for script writing and screenplay, I gave it a 3.5. I also gave it a 3.5 on the directing. The directing didn't seem anything stellar to me. It was okay. So I'm averaging out a 3.75.
Nice.
So that's it for this week. I just have to say, it's really interesting. Vote with your dollars, give movies like this a chance, and really look at what they're trying to tell you. Sometimes it's not what's on the surface.
Right.
Sometimes there are things underneath that make you think about, Jesus, what are we doing here? So this is one of those movies. So bravo.
It is.
And I guess that's it.
I was say you had a tie-in.
Yes. So what are we on about? I'm on about a couple of things, and I actually wrote them down. Because the little gray cell is running around screaming, looking for a thought right at the moment.
And I would just like to preface this, everyone, by if he says RH, he means rabbit hole.
Yeah, I wrote down RH, and that was my abbreviation for rabbit hole. But I told Vance in the pre-show, I said, I'm writing it as an abbreviation, but I'm not sure I'm going to remember what the abbreviation was. All right, so what am I on about this week? So I am on about anime and manga, because I'm picking up and I am learning to draw. And see, I have the book up here. And for those of you who are just listening to this on the podcast, on the airwaves, or the podcasts, or the whatever device you're listening on, start watching our YouTube channel, because I do throw up visuals for this show. It's not just two talking heads staring at a camera. I do try to embellish what we're talking about and give you examples, so in case you're not exposed to what we're talking about, you will see elements of it. So I've gone down a manga and anime rabbit hole, and I'm really kind of learning about all the subgenres, and I kind of knew them peripherally, but I didn't understand the way that the genres work and how they play. So I've kind of gone down that rabbit hole to understand what I'm doing, because what I want to do is I want to eventually do my own drawings as the visuals as book plates for my Mohawk series. I'd like to do it. And then eventually, if I get good enough, I would like to do maybe a web comic or something that tells the story from a comic book or graphic novel kind of stance. And I don't want to do straight up manga. I want to do a manga influenced comic. So it's going to have elements of that, much along the lines of Mike Deodato's form of art. I really like his style. He did Wonder Woman for a few pieces, and I really liked his version of Wonder Woman. So I kind of am thinking along that vein. That's kind of what I would like and what I envision it to be. So that's what I'm working towards. But for all intents and purposes, I've gone down that rabbit hole. So that's what I'm on about. But I also, and here's the tie-in, here's where I said put the pin in it from our review. I've also, as I watch a lot of YouTube, and this is not I think almost my what are we on about is all YouTube centric. I just say, what's on YouTube this week, Baz? But there is an advertisement that keeps coming up, and I thought it was very interesting. So literally just before we started recording this part of the episode, I went out and I signed up for it as a trial. There's a 21-day free trial, and then it converts to a $29.99 US dollar. Do your conversion wherever you are in the world, to $29.99 a year after that. And what it is, it's ground.news. And ground.news, what it does is it gives you like any topic that is in the news at the time. And then it breaks it down transparently into right, center, and left media across the world. So when you're looking at news sources, and they actually aggregate it for you. So say, for instance, it's on abortion. You have all of this collection of these stories. And as you click through the stories to read them, because they're aggregated in their site, you can actually see where they are politically on the spectrum. And it goes for, like, if I watch a lot of Deutsche Welle, I have actually read Der Spiegel. My news sources are broad. I don't just look at what happens here in the U.S. I actually get news from around the world. I've even watched WION, which is an Indian station or an Indian network out in India. So I try to get as much of a broad consensus, but it's nice to have this app to really know where these sources, even if they're in the media, where are they coming from? What is their perspective? What is the agenda that they may be pushing, so that I can get a fair and balanced idea of these opinions that I'm reading or these news articles that I'm reading. So ground.news is my new favorite thing. And so when I do research for this show, I'm definitely going to use it as a tool to check out where is this news source coming from, what's the 411 on it. And I know for the kids, they don't necessarily know what that means, but I'm going to check out what the 411 is on it, and find out, where those sources are coming from and what is their slant, so that I can ingest that information in a way that makes sense to me and where they are on the political spectrum. And I know I don't want to make this show all about politics, but we are kind of in a really crisis mode around the world with authoritarian governments trying to rise up. So I want to know where this information is coming from and how I can take in this information in a way that makes sense to me, so I understand the position that they're coming from. So I highly recommend checking out ground.news, ground.news. So that's what I'm on about this week.
Nice. Who won your week?
Well, who won my week? I know I often joke about the children, but I find it really, really heartening and just wonderful when I run across one of the children who is doing something for the good of the community at large. And there's this new guy that I just found on YouTube again, and his name is Tunde, Tunde. He's a young black male, but what he's doing is he is giving commentary on the ills of social media. He's telling people of his own age bracket, look, this is what's happening. Here are some of the horrific stories that have come out of these certain elements, like he does deep fakes, he does, so he goes on and talks about them, and he really cautions people of his generation, I'm assuming is the primary target audience for him, but he's talking to his peers saying, don't just believe what you see. He's done it on the evils of TikTok, and not just the horrific stories that happen within TikTok, but the actual source of TikTok in China and what's going on there. So he's really diving deeply into these social issues and dispelling them in a way that's accessible, that is easily digestible. And I find him very, very refreshing that there's one of them out there, much like the Parkland victims that are for gun rights or gun advocacy, that they're just as prevalent and prominent and out there on the forefront to get proper gun regulation going. So he's of that mold, in that he tries to educate his own generation to take a step back from the celebrity of it all and really look at what's happening and how free is not free. So I'm on about him. He won my week this week.
Nice. Mine?
What about you?
I'm going to give just a tiny bit of history. A couple decades ago, when I was paying off my student loans and talking to a banker about the sheer horror of them, the banker actually said the words, yes, these student loans are barbaric. Mm-hmm. And that has shaped my view of them, because it's true. They entrap the youth who are just coming into society as adults. And it's also
youth that aren't like well off.
Right, exactly. That's just it. They target the youth that don't come into the world with money, trap them into these horrible, life-crushing deals. Right, and most everybody I know has like slaved away under these rules. Mm-hmm. So the winner for my week is Biden and his Education Commission working their butts off to try to find some way to not only turn this around, but offer some sort of relief to those who are still struggling.
Right, and I don't think we should take our eye off the ball of what Bernie Sanders has been on about, that we need to provide free higher education.
We do.
We are so far behind the rest of the developed world on this. It is laughable. I remember there was somebody that I saw on, I don't know if it was MSNBC but it was someone from like my generation or yours, and they talked about when they went to school. No, I think it was my generation, or maybe it was a boomer. But they said they went to school. It had to be a boomer. When they went to school in the 70s. Oh, it was Rob Reiner. That's who it was. He went to school in the 70s at USC, and he paid $249 a year to go to that university. Mm-hmm. $249.
Right.
Which in those days was still a lot of money.
It was, but if you were to factor in inflation, that wouldn't be near the tens of thousands it is today. Exactly.
It has gotten way out of hand. And so what really points it out, and I hear a lot of people saying, well, I didn't go to college, I don't have student debt, what are you doing for me? I get that position. But one of the things that Bernie's trying to say is, okay, we do trade vocations, we do licensing, we do all of those things and provide them for free, that the state will sponsor it and get people higher mobility positions and allow them to excel in whatever their passion is.
Right.
And I think that's really where it boils down to. I also think that just as because we deal a lot with the arts, I think it would be great if they could set up artist housing so that artists can develop their art, work on their craft, and not have to worry about also keeping a roof over their head, but give them the opportunity to grow and thrive. And then as they become successful, pour it back into the system that brought them up. So there's many ways we can work at this. So I agree with you. I'm right behind you on this. I think it was a great win for us. Yeah. It's not everything, but it's a great win. We need to take our wins where we get them.
I know. And as we've been saying a lot this year, it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And we need to keep walking.
Yeah. And just to keep on that message, because the Dems are notorious for snatching defeat out of the jaws of victory, we need to keep talking up what's going right with them being in power, because if we can get a couple of more senators on and keep the Senate, and it looks like we have a real shot of keeping the House now. There's enough bad candidates out there, and McConnell is pulling ad buys at this late stage in the game. He's pulling ad buys from key ground states where it is really possible for us to flip those seats and take them for ourselves. So we have a real opportunity to hold on to everything. And if we get over this hurdle, we have a real chance to really make some real action moves to get things rolling the right way. Because I'm sorry, if you're a conservative and Republican and you listen to our podcasts, I implore you to really deep dive into your soul and figure out why you're against what we're on about in trying. We're not creating a socialist state. And, no. I've been to countries that have socialism, Norway, Denmark. Believe me, it's not as bad as everybody makes it. That is a huge misnomer that the right has propagated all along. And now they've made the huge leap from socialism is bad, although they still say it. They have no idea what it really means. Right. And then they jump over to the side where now they're all about authoritarianism. We can't live in that world, people. We cannot. So all I have to say is Berlin 1939. Keep it in your heads, kids. And if you're children out there, look it up. Google it. You'll see what I mean. So, there we are.
On that happy note, Written on the Edge is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. If you enjoy learning about new artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's going to be a lot more to see there in the future, so don't miss out.
We're working on stuff.
Oh yeah. Tune in next week for your Queer Media Fix. I was waiting for that.
Oh, what's there?
Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.